I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over. And Alix Harrow, let's see, once upon a time, I didn't know Alix Harrow. I don't know how that's possible. We met before 10,000 Doors was published. So what, we met in 18, early 19, something like that? And I was looking at the pub date for 10,000 Doors, and I thought, wait a minute, I thought this had published in like 2015 or 2016, and I'm like, 2019. My sense of time got really funky because you have always been part of my reading life as far as I'm concerned. So then we get Once and Future Witches, which, how many of you have read? Like, okay. My people, I'm so happy to see you. But Once and Future Witches was a monthly pick for us, and that was really fun. And that was when we were doing everything over Zoom, so Alix and I had to do our interview over Zoom, which, rock on. I'm delighted to have the technology. It makes things easier in some ways. But we've been talking about taping live for about 10,000 years. And finally, we saw each other last year at the LA Times Festival, and I was like, we need to make this happen. And then finally, here we are in Los Angeles at Barnes & Noble at the Grove, and we finally get to do a thing live. Here's the other thing. Technically, The Everlasting goes on sale tomorrow, but we got dispensation from the publisher so you guys can take your copies home. And I am very jealous of all of you because now you get to read it for the first time. And this book is amazing. It is so amazing, this book. I have to say, I knew what I was getting with Alix, right? Like, we all know what we're getting when we see Alix Harrow's byline on a book. No, seriously, we do. We know
I think they're all just so different. I truly
They
am like,
are
look,
different,
I'm doing a new thing.
But the dialogue is snappy, and you're always going to learn a thing, whether you know you're learning a thing or not. The characters are great. The story moves. Like, I know, even if you're playing on a different field, I know what your voice is going to sound like, right? And so then we get this guy, Owen, in The Everlasting, and I'm like, huh.
A man?
What
are we doing? Who is she?
Okay.
I know.
I had a moment of, okay, I'm down because it's you. Now, obviously, we're going to go spoiler-free in this conversation because I am not denying you guys the pleasure of reading this book. But I do want to talk about where this book started because, I mean, I had a moment, and I will totally own this, and you guys are going to think I'm totally wild for saying this. But when I first met Owen, and I'm going through and I'm like, World War I or World War II? Because, Alix does this thing where she grounds us in story to the point where we just know where we are in time and space, right? And I'm like, oh, of course, King Arthur, Oh, yeah, no. Oh, yeah, big no. So I do want to talk about where this book started. I mean...
But those vibes are right. Like, this is my first thing I've ever done that was secondary world. And if you're reading it and thinking like, it kind of feels like you're doing the Arthurian myth cycle's importance to the building of the British Empire in World War I. You're right. I'm also doing that. That's what I'm doing.
This is fun stuff, right?
I do want to back this up just slightly and be like, your perspective of... You met me and you're like, oh, you've always been an author. We've met. My first time meeting Miwa was like, I had never been to New York City before.
Oh, right.
I was still on Medicaid. I had a newborn at home. I was like counting down in my head, like, if I don't go to the bathroom and pump in the next like 15 minutes, I'm going to embarrass myself. And you were like the coolest person maybe I'd ever met. You lived in 2 cities. I'd never met anyone who lived in 2 cities. I was like, what? And you like knew every book and you went to the theater. And I was just like so starry-eyed. And then at one point you were like, where do you live? And I was like, rural Kentucky. And you were like, good, we can get you rural Kentucky money. And you were right. And you did that. And I have it. Now we get to talk here. And I'm so excited to still be in your reading life. Good advice.
So, I mean, but part of the joy for me, too, so my reading test, when you're a bookseller, right, you're reading, you read broadly, right? It's partially the job. It's also partially curiosity. It's partially also, frankly, a lifestyle. But when you find a voice, right, when you find a voice that's so new and so interesting, at the time, I was running a program called Discover Great New Writers because, it's gone through iterations and whatnot. But I promise you, Alix is not the only writer that you know who was part of this program. You may have heard of a book called The Poppy War. Yeah, right. Okay, you're welcome. Sometimes booksellers get it really, really right, and we have a really good time doing it. But voice is the thing, you know, if we're playing with fairy tales, if we're playing with alternate histories, if we're talking about mythology and propaganda, you still have this really sticky, great voice that I recognize immediately. There's just that little bit of edge. You're very funny, which helps. But there is always a grounding. There's a shared history. Like, Kentucky is not a place I necessarily know well, right? I know what I've read, whatever. But I read Starling House, and I'm like, oh yeah, I get this place.
And
Right.
I'm always curious about that because that one, Starling House is the one that's like roughly where and when I grew up. And so I foolishly thought that I wouldn't have to do research for it. I was like, this will be the easy one. I obviously spent
Alex.
like 2 years researching for it. And I sent that one out into the world, like, how is it going to connect with people who don't really know this place? And it's like, it's sold in France and it has footnotes explaining what Waffle House is. So we can get there. We can cross the cultural divides.
I've been to a Waffle House, but not in Kentucky. It was in Georgia, but I've been. But more importantly, I know I'm going to get characters that I want to hang out with, even the ones that frustrate me. When you meet Vivian, you will understand why I'm being slightly snarky about hanging out with the characters I don't necessarily love. Owen and Una, though. Let's start with Owen, because you do give him, shall we say, the microphone first.
Yeah. Which is interesting because when I conceived of this book, it was my lady night book. It still is my lady night book because I grew up very much on Tamora Pierce and Robin McKinley, and there was always going to be a lady night book, right? And it took me a while to realize that, like, I was circling the themes that I wanted and the character that I wanted. And one of the things about kind of creating a sense of legend or folklore in a book is that you actually need a little distance.
Yeah.
I found, like, if you're in their head, if you're watching them, no actual human is as heroic as this idea that you have. And so the person that could best explain my lady knight, my mythic hero, was someone who is obsessed with her second hand. So then you, the reader, are getting it third hand,
Right.
and you can build up this thing in your head. And so I had to start with someone who was maybe a little bit more like me, which is like a weird little nerd hunched in their office being like, God, she's so hot and cool, reading about lady knights, right? Like, I could relate on that level. And so Owen becomes like more the self-insert or the sort of person who's able to guide the reader through the story.
But he also doesn't know what he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And that's half of the fun, or at least was half the fun for me when I was reading, because watching him figure out, I mean, at one point it's like, well, are you a historian? Or are you the guy who's writing mythology that maybe veers more towards propaganda?
Yeah, one of my actual grad school, I have a master's in history, and one of my favorite professors said at one point, you can be a patriot or a historian, but not both. And that line is in the book from his grumpy advisor.
It's in my notes, too. It's a really good line.
And that's, yeah, thank you, Dr. Zuccotti. All my best lines are stolen, actually. And I just feel like one of the more fun concepts, everybody loves an unreliable narrator. And we tend to interpret that really personally, like they're unreliable because they're mentally ill or because they have trauma. But I think we're also unreliable narrators because of the cultural traditions we're handed and the lies that we have been told. And so he's an unreliable narrator because he's been made to be one, because he's been lied to his whole life by this sort of growing empire that is propagandizing itself through things like academic history. It's not relevant to the present at all, by the way.
No. But I have compassion for him as a character. I have compassion. Like, one of the things I love about reading you is there's never anyone who's just bad or just good. Everyone's very human, very messy. Thinking about the sisters in Once and Future Witches, like, I love those women, but I don't ever want them to be mad at me. But also didn't know what they didn't know. Yeah. Right? Like, that's the beauty of story. We all, as readers, get to live in that gap where we don't know what we don't know. So when you're writing, though, are you plotting stuff out or are you pantsing it?
Oh my God, you can't.
You're
Look,
pantsing it. You're totally pantsing
are
it.
you
aren't
serious? You think
Yeah,
that of
well,
me?
listen.
Do I not seem riddled with anxiety? How could I do that? No, I've never pantsed anything in my life. I got
Oh,
my
seriously?
seriously,
Okay.
truly,
All right.
anything, not just books.
Okay.
I got my driver's license, and I was 16 in Kentucky, and the state trooper was like, "You pass. I don't think I've ever seen anybody sweat it that hard." And I have brought that energy to every project in my life since then.
Okay, well, you make it look really, really, really effortless. So I'm gonna.
And this one in particular, it's a time loop book, which if you or anyone that you know or love is working on a time loop book, I want you to stop now. You can stop them. You don't have to do that. There's other kinds of books you can write. It's a nightmare, and it was a real nightmare to plot out. And I had just like pages and pages of charts trying to keep track of like what's repeating with small variations, why are the variations happening? And then if you make a little edit, you're like, oh, I should have had this happen. It echoes at least 6 times through the whole book. It was terrible.
Well, I'm sorry it was terrible for you. It was not terrible for me. We clearly had different
It was
experiences
also,
of the story.
shout out to my copy editor at Tor,
Right.
who got this book and created, I think, a 28-page document that was just charts to track small details to make sure that I was consistent through all the time loops. And at the end of it, she was like, you switched the side her scar was on once, but otherwise you get good job. So I think that's like an A-.
That is definitely, yes, that is definitely an A-. That is absolutely an A-. But the world building, right? Like world building, yeah, that part is never easy, but I buy in every single time, right? Like you can be retelling Sleeping Beauty and I'm like, yep, I'm here. Totally down for this. I see a lot of heads nodding and yeah, see, I'm not the only one. And we're talking about fairy tales. We're talking about stories that we've all heard 1,000 times, maybe with a tweak here. Maybe it's a little different from the French to the Turkish to the, however we want to tell it. But, and certainly the original Grimms are, but you still find a way to make it yours.
Well, that's the fun cheat of getting to use familiar things is that it's like the shorthand vocabulary and aesthetic that you get to use and deploy, and it saves you so much time on the page because then you're really just telling the reader what the differences are.
Right.
You're like as soon as you say the word castle, the reader has populated an entire landscape. They feel they know that world so well, or princess, or like whatever these kind of, or witch even. Like there's these key terms that come with so many assumptions that then you get to spend your time saying, but this is different. Notice this, and like drawing attention to the changes.
I mean, the minute Una pulls her sword out of a yew tree, I'm just like, oh, hi. And I'm not spoiling anything for any, I promise I'm not spoiling anything. But I had a moment of, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, his name is Owen Mallory, so I'm not like trying to be sneaky about the Arthurian influence. It's there. And I did the very earliest version of this, like not written down, but just in my notes, was like maybe to actually use real Arthurian legend and pull from that. But I'm not an Arthurian scholar.
This was better. And this, I mean, there are enough nods. Again, I felt very grounded in where I was, to the point where I had a moment of like, okay, World War I or World War II. We're not. Okay, just to be clear, we are not standing on the shores of Dover, etc. But I did have a moment just given how Owen approaches the world and how he was educated and some of his experiences. It was a little like reading Alice Wynn's novel In Memoriam, and which is 2 soldiers in World War I in the UK and fighting in Europe, but they're British. And I had a moment of, oh right, I get this.
Yeah.
And that's suddenly I don't get this.
Well, and that's what the biggest fear if you're doing something that's like secondary world and there's time loops and you wrote it mostly in like alternating second person and you did all these big asks for a reader, right? Like you tried to design a book that would fail on Goodreads, that would just be hated, right? If you built it in a lab, then you do need to pull on those familiar things, right? So like there's a reason that if everyone's smoking cigarettes and there's war recruitment posters on the wall, like immediately you feel like you know where you are. I want you to have the sense that you know where you are.
Which I love, but then you also start playing with the ideas of physical beauty, because Una, as she's presented in these war posters, right, she's perfect. Her hair is perfect, her skin is perfect, her armor glows. Everything is perfect because she is, in fact, the symbol of the place. And then we meet Una, and she's like, well, you know, I've got this funky scar under my eye, and actually, there's some other stuff, and I'll leave that to you guys to figure out. But I love the idea that we can play with the pure physicality of women.
And I really liked getting to do that in this book. I got to make this book more about the body and the physical than any of my other stuff.
You put her through it, man. You put her through a lot.
No, I mean that both in the sense of like warfare and violence, but also in like pleasure and sex. I wanted to do both of those things more intensely than I had before, because it's a little bit about like kind of finding the site of resistance in each other and in our physical bodies, as opposed to like these big ideas like nation and empire and anything like that. Anyway, I really liked getting to make what I imagine a lady knight might actually have been, which is like big and tough and ugly. As compared to the way they are deployed sort of in pop culture. Like if you think of images of Joan of Arc, she's beautiful, virginal, young, white, blonde, like all of these, tiny. She's a child. And that doesn't check out really. Nor does it check out when you look at other like, I hesitate even to use the word lady knight, but like women or gender traitor type figures who are like adopting physical violence, participating in wars. Antonio de Arauso, the lieutenant nun, comes up a lot when you start looking at these things. And they are not beautiful and beloved in their moment. They're literally burned at stakes.
Right.
And like what she was actually burned for was a refusal to give up her men's clothing, right? In the end, that's what they nailed her for. And so I feel like getting to play with the distance of like, how would a legendary knight who was a woman be remembered? And it would be as like a virgin and a saint and beautiful and young, versus like if a woman fought, what would she have looked like? I really enjoyed that.
I really liked reading about it. Part of what you're wrestling with too is the legacy of imperialism, right? And that America, the UK, Europe, Asia, all of it, right? Like imperialism is something that we don't always look at head on, right? We take the stories we've been told that sometimes end up in history books, and sometimes you're just looking at it side-eyed going, yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I super don't think so.
Especially American audiences.
You know,
we don't think that we had an empire. We still don't think that. I don't know why. We think that we are a product of empire and not a perpetrator of empire.
Right.
And so what was interesting of getting into like the Arthurian cycle and its various iterations is what I immediately realized is that like I don't even know the originals. There's not any such thing as an original, but bear with me. I know the watered down, Americanized, Disney-fied versions of these stories, which then leads you to the questions of like, why is America so obsessed at various times throughout our history with the neo-medieval imagery? Like, what is that doing for us?
Wait, can we add Vikings into this?
Yes,
please?
and Vikings
can we please
too.
Add the Viking thing in?
Vikings are worse a little bit, actually.
You know,
Like I was reading, I didn't really realize until I was doing research for this book why Mark Twain wrote A Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And it's because he was so annoyed by Walter Scott. He called it the Sir Walter Scott disease, and that it obsessed the South and held the South back, because it was obviously the South loved anything medieval because it's a beautiful set of romantic images to justify hierarchy. And
have you ever met a Bostonian? Just
yes.
saying.
Anyway, there's a reason it was a Southern Gothic revival. In their architecture and in their arts. And so Mark Twain hated it very, very deeply and wrote that in part specifically to be like, you guys are such losers. And I appreciate that energy behind a book.
With many of your stories revolving around fairy tales and folklore, what are the stories that inspired you to be a writer, specifically one who specializes in these retellings?
Like, what are the stories that made me be a writer, or this kind of writer?
Let's start with inspiration, and then maybe, I mean, I know some of the answer, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't have said that I was somebody who wrote retellings a lot. And it's just clear that I do. and I understand that. I do. But I just grew up kind of in this second generation nerd world of like all of my mom's sci-fi and fantasy books, all of her books of folklore and fairy tales. Like I was the only kid in like Alvaton Elementary School in Kentucky who, when Mulan, the movie, was announced, I was like, oh, I've read the ballad. That's not popular. That's not, you're not making friends. But I was raised in this world where things were always being retold all the time. And I was both had my mom's old books and in that kind of era of YA retellings where there was always a new King Arthur book, there was always a new fairy tale retelling. And I think that's like how I think of the world. And then when I went to grad school, I ended up studying cultural history and the history of empire and looking a lot at like how my thesis was on children's literature and empire in children's literature and how we tell stories, often stories to children, to teach really specific lessons.
The entire Grimm's oeuvre, you mean? The entire
a nationalist project. Exactly. Yeah. They were trying to weld a national identity out of a group of just totally disparate people who didn't even really speak the same language. And so invented a sort of ideal Germanic peasant who told these lovely folk tales that happened to resonate really well with Victorian moral lessons.
You see the pattern here, right? No, but you also really did read. I mean, there was a lot. If I remember correctly, there was a lot of Atwood.
Yeah, a lot of Le Guin.
Yep.
Butler. Like, you know how most people, I feel like in genre in particular, you have to come of age and then you're like, oh, now I found all these like cool, subversive women authored often, like this other history of our genre that's not all Heinlein.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I didn't even know who Heinlein was until like high school. I had it pre-screened and handed to me. And so like I assumed the baseline and everyone's baseline was Ursula Le Guin. And then we move on from there.
Oh,
and that's not true.
No, it's not. But you do, I mean, retellings isn't exactly what you do because it's spinning it, trying to stay off of the fairy tale metaphor, and I'm going to fail. I'm going to so fail. It's more, though, that you're refracting through a lens. That's sort of how I see it more than anything, because it's so obviously you when I'm reading this. Again, I go back to the dialogue, like the really sharp dialogue and the humor and the sort of raised eyebrow pretty much every other page, which, you know, it's nice when you find the person who raises an eyebrow at the same thing you raise an eyebrow at, and you're like, oh, my people, this is delightful.
See, I see what you're saying.
And when you slide in the history jokes, too, I'm just like, yep. Yep.
That's for my people. Yeah. I feel like what you're saying is I am always writing books and stories about stories.
Yes.
And I feel that and know that to be cringe. I do. It's like when you're watching a movie that is about the wonder of movies, you're like, tone it down. Okay, we get it. This is the art you do. Yeah. But it is genuinely how I process the world, and so we're stuck here.
Says the woman who graduated from college at 19, went at 16, graduates at 19, works on her master's, then decides, yeah, I'm kind of done with empire, but I'm not, and I'm going to go. There
was a significant section of living in a van in the middle of this.
Okay,
it's
yes.
Not a success story.
It just took
I wouldn't recommend it.
It took you a minute to figure out where things were going. And speaking of taking a minute, when writing a time loop novel or any narrative that relies on earlier clues like a puzzle box, how do you keep track of it all outside of your excellent copy editor? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to turn the edge on this because we did sort of answer part of this question. But how much of the writing is rewriting?
Oh, so much of it.
Right.
And I already write very slowly. I'm not somebody who like does like people call it a zero draft, where they rush through and they have their draft that they
Wait, it has a name?
Yeah, have you heard of the zero draft? Oh, everything has a name. There's, you know. Yeah, I hate the idea of it. I have to make everything like at least feel nice or look nice to me and make sense to me and be roughly what I want before I can move on. So I'm already writing slowly. And then I think every book I'm like, this time I've figured it out and I won't have to do this. But every book at about a third of the way through, I'm like, I was completely wrong. My beautiful outline is wrong and I have to go back to the beginning and not totally rewrite, but kind of rewrite.
Okay.
And then I'm like, now I've got it all right. I've redone my outline. I know exactly what I'm doing. And I carry it like a security blanket to about the 2/3 mark. And then I do the same thing again and rewrite it. And it's almost always because like I have like a beginning point and a really clear ending. And like the ending justifies, is the thesis of the thing for me.
Okay.
And if I'm I'm coming up to that conclusion and I'm like, but it's not going to hit the way that I wanted it to hit, because these things aren't resonating well enough, that's when I have to go back. And I said this to Olive E. Blake, and she was like, girl, change the ending instead of the first 75% of the book. And I was like, I see now why you have 3 books a year.
Well, but also your methodology is your methodology.
Yeah, we're here now.
I don't know. I appreciate writers who find their pace, and some are faster than others, but I don't want everyone to suddenly feel like they have to do at least a book a year, if not 2 or 3 books a year. That's not for everyone.
Yeah,
and I think readers too would like to catch up every now and again. I know I have a TBR, but this is also my job. So like, how do you manage a TBR when this is not your job?
Don't worry, there won't be a book a year. For you guys.
Well, it also feels like you like to spend time in these worlds, though, that you don't want to leave either.
Yeah, well, by the time I've sunk this much like research in, I'm in deep. I've interlibrary loaned all these books, like, and I do feel like I need to make something a place worth staying for a while.
Yeah. Some of us read too fast. Just saying. Second person, though, that's not your average choice for setup and structure. How did we get there? I mean, it's partially putting Owen out in a field, but it's not just putting Owen out in a field.
Yeah, I did try because, all right, so I sent in the pitch for this book to my editor and I got an email back that just said, let's hop on a call. And I was like, wah, wah, that's not good. That's never a good sign. And she was very nice. She truly is just a person who wants you to write a good book that she can sell, right? Like, she's not working against me in any way. But she was like, I don't know. You just did a contemporary Southern Gothic, and now you're saying to me secondary world, Arthurian time loop. There's a knight. What she said was, do we want the next Alix E. Harrow book to have a sword on the cover?
I'm good with it. I mean, the bookseller says yay. Thank you.
And I was like, I don't know, but there's going to be a sword in the book. And I could feel all of the things that were making it a little bit unmarketable. Like when you say, like, I just really want to talk about the deployment of gendered heroism to make lady knights palatable for Empire. They're like, cool, that sounds so cool. We love that. And so I remember being on the call and be like, I'm not going to say the thing about second person. I don't think that would go over that well at this moment. And so I tried to write it in, I think, third is what I started out with. Like third past. I was like, come on, somebody's got to play for Team Normal here. And it just didn't have the resonance that I wanted it to have. Because like the engine of this book is supposed to be this connection between two people. And the repeating of events did not work for me when it was, you're just seeing it from, it's just switching pronouns, essentially. I wanted it to be like completely embodied. And the way to do that and to make it feel like almost like love letters, because it's not true second person. The reader is not the you. The you is the other one of this pair. So it's almost epistolary feeling. But it was supposed to really sink you down into their perspective so you don't get too tangled up in like time loops and questions about consistency. Don't worry about that. It's not that kind of book.
It's totally not that kind of book. It is a love story in disguise, which surprised me a little bit. And not in a but in a kind of way. I wasn't sure that Una, I thought she was doing okay standing on a hill with her sword.
Yeah.
But watching her be knocked off balance in ways that she obviously never expected was kind of delightful.
Well, the more I thought about kind of this idea of like, because I was very curious at the beginning of like, what is it that is so appealing to me about knighthood as a concept, and like how the way it functions is sort of the ultimate idea of like a hero, and it's a very gendered one. It's
Right.
very masculine, and it has all these other sort of connotations to it. Like it's, I think, romantic often. I think often alone. There's this knight alone on a quest. He's sad. He's loyal to some sort of thing. Sometimes God, sometimes a king, sometimes both.
Heart
often a
definitely
woman.
broken.
His heart is broken.
definitely broken.
Absolutely. He's probably got cool scars. Anyway, but this idea of this lone figure struck me as a really kind of Western idea of heroism, of like it is this sole person who is journeying through the world alone and may never find the object of their affection. They're just a theoretical thing that they serve. And so if you're subverting a lot about knighthood, I really wanted to subvert the idea of sacrifice and of loneliness.
Okay, but Emily's also asking, was it important, though, to break traditional gender roles for Owen and Una? And I think that question goes a little bit beyond what you just
Yeah, absolutely
said.
I really wanted to do that, in part because, all right, we're in a moment where there's a lot of romantic fantasy or romantasy or whatever you want to call it being published. And I think that's great. I think there should be more porn in books. I truly believe that. I'm not kidding at all. I read a ton of historical romances, and I think we're going through like a very weird puritanical cultural moment. And so I frankly like to see this publishing trend. However, it's all real straight, and it's all very gendered in a way that feels 20 years older than where we are right now.
Yes, ma'am.
It's interesting culturally, and I'm excited to see what the second and third waves of it look like. But in this world of young, pretty, virginal girls and domineering, physically large men who are telling them what to do, I was like, well, I can't be doing that. And what's the point of a Lady Knight book if she doesn't get to bridal carry him at least once? I don't know what we're doing here.
I mean, I got really attached to both of them and was rooting for them separately and together because I wasn't entirely sure, you know, when you're reading Alix, you don't necessarily, you might think you know where things are going, and then you're like, oh, hi, I'm here now. What just happened? In the best possible way. But watching them figure out what they don't know.
You try not to spoil things.
Really, yeah, no, it's really, really, really satisfying. But it also felt really new and really surprising in the best ways. And I mean, there are ways where, I mean, we're talking about Arthur, right? Like, we are and we aren't, but how many different ways can you do King Arthur? You know, there's Guy Ritchie, there's not Guy Ritchie.
I love the Guy Ritchie King Arthur,
so
by
do
the way.
I will own that
It
right
is
there with
such a
I'm
good
right there with
time.
you. Yes, it is fun and it is goofy, but it's also a quick reference point. Like that is definitely a King Arthur that no one had seen before. Then there's also Clive Owen. You know, we have multiple versions of these things, and then we get Una, and Una is deeply satisfying. But I feel like, again, you're talking about privilege. You're talking about entitlement. You're talking about, well, women's anger. This pops up occasionally for you, my friend. Which, again, part of the fun of reading you. There are a couple of characters, and not just Una, who may think the world owes them something. So that's when I say I know when I'm reading you, thematically I know when I'm reading you. Like, it's not just imperialism. It's women not putting up with being treated.
Which is part of the Project of Empire.
Yes, it is.
It really is. And the other part of the Project of Empire that I really finally, I feel like, got to kind of dig my teeth into in this one is the way that gender roles must serve empire under imperialism. So like each person has their role to play. And that means that women at the top of the hierarchy, white women, women of privilege, women with wealth, are participating in the project of empire, not just as like handmaidens, but as generals, you know, and they're making this whole thing function, often to serve themselves. And so I struggle in our current moment of this sort of narrative of permanent victimhood for white womanhood that I think is really dangerous, actually. Because once you're this victim, once things have been taken from you, once there's injustice against you, which sure there is, we all live in patriarchy, welcome, then you can't do anything really evil. Everything is just getting back and getting yours. And I had a really good time writing that.
I can't wait for you guys to start reading this book. How do you carve out time for reading more books with, you know, deep information? How do you do research when the world is a really uncomfortable place?
Yeah, I do research sort of throughout. I feel like I can't really have my idea of the book until I've done at least some. You have to go to the library at least a few times and spend a lot of days, really just like your whole working day, which is the whole kids' school day, 7:30 to 2:30, is just reading. And that's kind of where the book structure will come out of. Like you'll run into ideas there. And so that's the big picture. And then I kind of stop researching for a while. And then there's sort of more waves of it as you get into the details of the things you need to know, right? Like I did my big picture, how has Arthurian mythology served British Empire sorts of reading. I put it away for a while. And then I ended up more embroiled in things like Joan of Arc imagery in Vichy, France. And choosing like much more specific things as they came up in the novel. So it's just sort of, I'm always researching and always writing.
I want to go back to the yew tree for a second because this is a very big piece of the book. And we're sitting in Los Angeles, and I'm going to ask you to describe a yew tree. Because if you've ever seen a photo, they're kind of trippy. They are kind of trippy.
And they're some of the oldest, longest living trees in the world. The really trippy good ones are like in Wales and England and Ireland. But they're like a very gnarly evergreen, but with real flat, leafy looking needles. I've been tagged in a few reels. Every now and then, one of these really cool, really old trees in England kind of goes viral on Instagram. And people are like, oh my God, this one tree is like 2,500 years old and it's like grown into the churchyard. Did you know this about yew trees? I was like, girl, yes, come on. There's a reason I chose them.
Like I said about being grounded in the story, right? Like literally grounded in place. Starling House, though, Kentucky, same thing. I mean, the new America that we get in Once and Future Witches and New Salem, certainly the New England that we get in 10,000 Doors. You have a really, and I'm choosing this word deliberately, you have a really ferocious sense of place, which I appreciate. But you get in there and you dig in.
I know. A friend of mine told me that he skips all the plant names in my books. And I was like, no, I chose those all very carefully. They're native or not on purpose. And I know, like, and I just had this realization of how much time I sink into something that for some readers is just, that's not for them. And I understand that. That's fine.
Okay, that's not me. Just saying, that's not me. But I mean, when I think about the places I'm willing to follow you, it's always a little trippy, but I trust the voice. Pretty sure I'm going to end up smarter by the end of it. Pretty sure. And I never, as much as I think I know where I'm going, I always get a really excellent, surprising payoff at the end. And I like knowing that you know that the ending is sort of your, your beacon, your lighthouse. When you're reading, though, and I'm not talking about reading for research, when you're reading, a short story or a piece of fiction or part of a novel or what have you, are you reading for voice first? Are you reading for place? Are you reading for stuff to happen? I mean, what's the thing that you're looking for?
Oh, as a reader?
As a reader,
No,
as a reader.
I feel like the reader's job is, I feel like I can make myself, for many kinds of books, kind of the ideal reader for that book. I want to be there for what it's trying to do, right? And so like when I'm reading a historical romance, which I read like 5 a week, I am like paying so much attention to how they're doing dialogue, how they're managing tension, how they're building this relationship. Some historical romance writers are also doing just incredible things with language or with place or with their own research. I love it when I'm in the middle of one of them and you can just tell that they know everything there is to know about divorce law in 1841, and you're going to know too. And I'm like, I'm ready for it. I'm so excited.
I'm actually reading North and South right now, this Elizabeth Gaskell novel.
Okay.
All right. So I've discovered that I really liked Middlemarch.
Yeah.
I was very late to it. I was not an English major, so long story. I read it for an interview. And I finally read Pride and Prejudice about 2 months ago. Yes, I was raised by wolves. I was raised by wolves.
Welcome.
They tried. They tried to get me to read Jane Austen before I was ready, and so I was prepping for an interview, and I was like, you know what, I really just need to do this now. And turns out I don't think Darcy's a drip. That was kind of a cool moment. But I literally started North and South not that long ago, and I am reading it for an interview. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, I like this Margaret woman. She's cool.
Yeah.
And I like where this is going. And I'm just thinking, wait a minute, I have an opinion on a British social novel from 1835. Okay. Yeah. I mean, but yeah, it is that moment where you're like, yeah, I'm hanging out with these people. This is great. I knew Middlemarch had me when I texted a friend in the middle of the night and said, I can't believe Casaubon put that thing in his will. That codicil in his will. That was gross. I was so mad. Texting a friend at like 10 o'clock at night going, I can't believe this.
Okay, there's a wonderful, I think, 1990s historical romance that I was halfway through, and I was like, this is Middlemarch fan fiction. And it functionally is. Yes, it's great. It's called Black Silk by Judith Ivory, and it's so tight. Okay. I also love it in any kind of book where you're like, oh, you're just doing this for the love of the game. Like, this is not marketable. This is not a efficient choice to have made. Like, Judith Ivory has sections, I think it's Baudelaire poetry that it's various French poems that are translated in English, and the translator is always listed as this one person that I Googled and couldn't find. And then I have another friend who's actually a French translator who was also reading these books, who was like, wait, it's an anagram of her name. So she was translating them herself from the original French, and I was like, girl, okay.
Do the thing that makes you love words.
Joy. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I mean, I'm not sure, well, my French is not good enough to translate Baudelaire for anything. But at the same time, I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
total respect.
I think that's what I'm looking for in a reader, is some sense of wonder and passion. Like, why did they write this book? And if they can communicate that to me, I'm an easy sell. Like, I'm there.
I don't think you're that easy. No, I refuse to believe that. I do think there is a lot to be said, though, for reading for the pure pleasure of it. Yeah. I mean, and I'm always... I mean, there are times where I'll read blind. I will literally get a manuscript from an editor. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Title, do I have a pub date? I don't really care. And it's actually kind of how I prefer to read. I don't really want someone else's flap copy. I mean, sometimes the flap copy is helpful, and sometimes I'm like, I'm sorry, did we read the same book? But yeah, that sense of wonder and that sense of discovery and serendipity. Like, you can get lost in ways that, I mean, we all walk around with a phone, right? Like, you can't get lost unless your phone dies and like, okay, fine, whatever. But you can't get lost in the world the way we used to be able to get lost in the world. Like, I grew up right next to sort of this very wooded area, and like, we would actually just knock off into the woods, and we didn't come home until Mom said, you can come back into the house now. Raised by wolves. But that, that curiosity and that discovery and that, like, what is this landscape and who are these people and what are these ideas?
And being able to take the time to do that is just a privilege. Like, I just finished reading Watership Down to my kids for the first time.
Oh, you did not? Seriously?
It still hits. For the
Okay.
7 and 9-year-old crowd, for the record.
Delighted to hear that. I'm sorry, I saw the movie too early, and that was just not good. That was not.
I had read the book before I saw the movie, so I was like safe. I was like, that's not how Bigwig looks. So I was fine. But it's a long book.
Yeah.
And it has footnotes about how rabbits do math. And I was like, I don't know if my 7 and 9-year-old kids are going to be into this. And they were like, I watched them be drawn in.
Yeah.
And just fall in love with the whole folklore of like El Herrera and this rabbit trickster god that he's invented. And they were in so deep that I just found they had made a detective club together or whatever, and there was a secret password to it, and the password is Bigwig together. And it's such a privilege to get to get lost in books like that.
Right. I don't know. That seems like kind of a good place to wrap, even though you and I could do this for like 7 more hours.
Yeah, do you just want to talk about books now?
Yeah, I
'Cause
kind of do, but we also need to get people's books signed. We have a purpose. We have other things we need to do. Although, yeah, we're going to do this again. We're totally doing this again. All right. Thank you, Los Angeles. Gives us 2 seconds to
you.
get everything set up. But Alix, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.